All right, folks, welcome to Procam. Whoops, let me get back to Procam for a minute. Welcome to Procam. And a couple of things I want to start off with is just the ability to show and hide a submenu. So in the submenu mode, a couple of things I just want to point out. I have the rule of thirds grid on right now. I'm tapping that off and on for you to see. I would start off with the rule of thirds grid on, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's really useful just to sort of align things and kind of know where you're at. I also like to have this little option down here that I'm pressing. That's just a horizon line. It'll give you some kind of indication. You see how the middle one is kind of lighting up like that. So that will help you, if you're looking for horizon, that'll help you to know whether you're straight or whether you're crooked. So do you see as I'm moving the horizon line, my angle on the horizon line, it's also changing the horizon line at the bottom. So depending on what you want there, you might want a diagonal. I don't know. All right, so now the options across the screen that you're seeing right here are all sort of things that you would also switch around in a DSLR. Automatic exposure has to do with the lightness and darkness of your image. As you can see, if I scroll to the left, I'm actually increasing the amount of light coming in. I can tell that just by the look of the photo, but I can also see that because it's increasing those red stripes. So that's generally bad. That means that I'm pretty overexposed. So I want to dial that down so that I have, that I'm reducing those hot spots as much as possible. And remember, even if it looks a little bit dark, you can always take that image into Lightroom, for example, and increase exposure. So I like to sort of go, somewhere where I've eliminated as many of those spots, those hot spots as possible. Be like that. I mean, it's okay to have a few there, especially where the light is. Now, the next thing we want to do is we can see that we have shutter. So this is shutter speed. Shutter speed has to do with how fast the camera will take the photo. And as you can see, shutter also affects light. ISO is the sensitivity of the sensor, and so ISO is not really letting more or less light in, but what it's doing is it's making the camera device more sensitive to light. Autofocus has to do with focus points, setting focus. Every time I place, I'm just like touching the screen right now to sort of determine where I'm going to have focus. And if I like an area of focus, let's get something a little bit closer so that I can see. Let's go ahead and increase a little bit of light there. Now, if I come back to focus, I go right for the center, and let's say that I like that. I can hold and lock that focus. So even if I move it away a little bit, that focus point stays the same, okay? So let's go ahead and we'll take a photo. Now let's take a look at that photo. As we've seen before, I can tell that's a raw plus a large photo. I can see that just like we've done before. If I look at the information, I can see there's a DNG, digital negative, plus a JPEG. All right, let's go back now. Let's kind of focus more on shooting. Back to the camera. Okay, let's go live again. Now I'm going to get a little bit closer this time, and you're going to notice sometimes you're going to try to get so close, but you can't maintain focus. This has to do with the fixed aperture, okay? So sometimes you're going to see that you actually need to pull out a little bit, not zoom out, but physically pull out so that you can achieve focus. Okay, so something to take into consideration. I'm going to go to where the light is. There's a little bit of light coming in on these leaves over here. Go ahead and see if I can achieve focus. I'm pulling back a little bit, and that's pretty good. So we'll take that photo. All right, so that gives you a little bit of information there. White balance. What does white balance do? So white balance will actually change sort of the color of the light coming in. And so what light balance is really useful for is if you have different lighting conditions, like if it's shady, extra sunny, and things like that. Okay, so we had talked a little bit about the rule of thirds, and now I'd like to demonstrate why the rule of thirds can be so useful. I really have my rule of thirds grid on. I have my rule of thirds grid on a lot because I find it really useful for aligning things. So again, I'm just kind of in my backyard looking for things to shoot, kind of framing things. I really love to go for details. I'm going to go back for a minute to auto exposure, check my exposure. This looks pretty good. I'm not getting anything that looks too overexposed. I've got a tiny little bit of ringing there, but it's not bad. Now, one of the things in terms of the rule of thirds, what you really have that I think is so nice, I'm going to put the focus point here on the intersections of the lines that form the rows and columns of the rule of thirds. Now, the intersections of those rows and columns are really, really great in terms of alignment. So for example, let's go ahead, let me go to autofocus, and I'm just going to try to place focus right there on that rule of thirds intersection. Let's see what I have. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I could go in and do quite a lot with that to bring out a little bit more color, a little bit more light maybe is really what I'm looking for. However, I'm going to wait to do that later on when I'm actually in, in one of the programs that I want to work with. Let's look a little bit more at the rule of thirds. What else can I do with the rule of thirds? Let's keep looking here. And again, somebody once said, probably a lot of people have said this, that photography is really about painting with light. And I think it's so true. So what you're really constantly looking for is, the image and the available light source. So let me see what we can do here. Where's some light that we can see? There's some interesting light we see coming through these little leaves here. I'm actually going to see if I can adjust the exposure. That's pretty good. Again, as you can see, I'm not getting too much overexposure. A little bit in the sky, but not too bad. And I can see there's a little bit of sun coming through there. Now let's see what I can do in terms of, ooh, look at that. So now, again, I'm going to sort of look for an area to focus on. That's kind of nice, because I've got this nice pattern in the background. Right at the rule of thirds, I've got some interesting stuff happening. And let's go ahead and take that shot. So again, I think using the rule of thirds as a way to sort of guide is not a bad idea at all. Now, let's look at something else we want to pay attention to, or something else at least that's kind of useful. Some of the other things that you have are night mode. Night mode, obviously it's daytime right now, so I can't really do very much with night mode right now, but night mode will help you reduce some of the noise in images that are taken at night. Burst mode is where you want to shoot a whole bunch of things all at the same time, like a whole bunch of shots of the same image all at the same time. Slow shutter we're going to do later, so hold on to that. And portrait mode we're also going to do later, so hang on your hats for that one too. Basically, those have a lot to do with aperture and shutter, which we're going to get into in subsequent things. So don't worry too much about those right now. I would recommend that you just stay for the moment in the photo mode, and that you just get used to changing automatic exposure and automatic focus, and then locking those when you get somewhere where you like. So like with automatic exposure, so for example, with automatic exposure, with automatic exposure, again, I just want to be able to balance light and practice framing. And notice too, like if I wanted to have the edge of these two, the end of these two leaves fall right kind of evenly on that horizon line, I can balance it to do that. Although again, I see some really interesting stuff happening with light down here. So as the light gets stronger, I also want to pay attention to like what can I bring out. And here's some interesting, and here's something really kind of interesting is that we've got some nice pattern here, but then we also have some really cool looking shadows down here. So now let's go into the focus and let's figure out where do we want to place focus. And let's go ahead and do that because I really like getting the little bit of shadow that's underneath, kind of playing with the leaves and the shadows and things of that nature. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, one more shot and we'll come over here. Let's see what these flowers are doing. Okay, I got to be careful because I don't want to get my own shadow in the image here. Let's see. Let's maybe come over here. And let's go back to auto exposure. Let's get a little bit more light in here. Let's go to auto focus. Now you'll notice too that I can have this little round wheel come up here, this little round magnifier, and that also helps me to see whether I'm in focus or not. And I'm going to try to position this somehow interestingly. Okay, and I've also got, I can see, for example, that I have some interesting light sort of behind this particular flower. So I'm going to grab that. And I want to look at all different angles, like where can I, where are some interesting angles? Looking at water is also very often an interesting thing to do. Let's pull the water up. So as you can see, right now I'm looking down at the water just kind of dripping out of the pool. So let's go ahead and shoot that for a minute. I want to show you something kind of quickly with shutter speed that you can do if you happen to be in a backyard and there's some water in your pool doing something. I'm going to go to slow shutter. What slow shutter lets you do is do a motion blur. Now the key here is being really, really, really steady. 4 seconds is what that's set to, which is fine. Okay, so the resulting image is almost kind of abstract in a way.